All right, we're going to continue talking about Mendel in this video. We know that Mendel is the father of genetics, and he did a lot of experimentation with different garden plants, specifically pea plants. And as he did all these tests, he got lots of data. He kept very careful track of everything. He came up with 4 principles that from the data that he collected. So after a lot of experimentation, one of the principles is that alternate versions of a gene account for the variations in inherited characteristics. So okay, we got 2 words in here. We've got gene that we need to be aware of. What is a gene? And we know from Unit 1 that that's an area on our DNA that codes for a trait. So a gene, piece of DNA, and it has this hereditary information, traits that are going to get passed on to the kids someday. For plants, that might be flower color. For us, it might be eye color or your height, or it might be whether or not you have a hitchhiker's thumb. We can talk about what a hitchhiker's thumb is if you don't know if you have one or not. Those are all genes. And then we have alleles, A-L-L-E-L-E, alleles. These are alternate versions of a gene. So if you think about, let's say, flower color, what are some versions of flower color? Well, in Mendel's instances, he had purple and white flower possibilities. So the gene, flower color, and the alleles are all the different versions of that gene that you can have. So for instance, in humans, we might have height as our gene. That the alleles might be, 7 foot, 6 foot 12, 6 foot 11, 6 foot 10, 6 foot 9, 5 foot, 4 foot 3, all of the different versions of height would be alleles. This picture shows you the chromosome. What it doesn't really show you is that you have DNA. Your DNA is part of this chromosome. So if I just kind of add that in there, and then we know that on our DNA there are areas that code for traits. So we have this particular area maybe that codes for height or flower color if you're Mendel. And again on this chromosome as well. So lots of different alleles exist and genes on any particular one DNA. You might have another gene over here and one in here and one here. You might have 100 genes on one in one chromosome. His second principle states that for every character, now remember characters are things that you inherit. For every character you receive 2 alleles. So you get 2 versions of that gene. You get one from each parent. This would be the homologous. And because you have 2 sets. Okay, so you have 2 sets of chromosomes. Mom provides you one character, one allele. Dad provides you information for the other. One from mom, one from dad. So again, if this was our homologous chromosome, maybe this particular area codes for brown eyes from dad, let's say, and this area for mom, it codes for blue eyes. So each parent is providing you one allele, one in this case for brown and one allele for blue, but both of them have the gene location for eye color. His third principle says that some alleles are dominant and others are recessive. So we need to know what a dominant allele is. This is the one that's going to determine your appearance. If the dominant allele is there or present, then you will have whatever characteristic that's referring to. For recessive alleles, if you have a recessive allele in only one of them, you're not going to notice any effect or change in your appearance. If the dominant one is there, the dominant one kind of wins over. But the recessive one will show up only if there's no dominant present. So you have to receive 2 recessive alleles and no dominant allele. In this case, for Mendel, what he noticed when he did all of his genetic experiments in the garden there, that the dominant trait was round. He saw that more often than the wrinkled trait. Yellow was dominant, tall was dominant over short. In humans, we know that maybe brown eyes is dominant over blue, brown hair dominant over maybe, let's say, red hair. Those are, maybe what we would be looking at on the human side. And this is why Mendel's F1 generation, that's why they were all purple. Purple flowers is dominant. So when you had that purple flower with the white flower, that parent was passing on the gene for purple. The other parent was passing on the gene for white, and all of the offspring had a white allele and a purple allele. Well, purple was dominant, so the outward showing for the plant was purple. His last principle is called the law of segregation, and segregate means to separate. Okay, take two things and remove them away from each other. So two alleles are going to separate or segregate when we make our gametes, and we have seen this already. Your sperm and your egg cells only get one of your two chromosomes. The homologous chromosomes, we know, pair up together in metaphase 1, but then in anaphase 1, one gets pulled to the right and one to the left. So that means that this chromosome, let's say for brown hair, gets put into one cell, and the chromosome for red hair gets put into the other cell. So you may have a sister, brother, maybe that has a different hair color than you, and that's because parents have two alleles, and they're only giving you one of them. And it's likely that your sibling maybe got a different one. This is just showing you that they segregate. So here's Dad, and he has a dominant allele, a capital, and a lowercase allele, and those are going to separate from each other when he makes the gametes. So he's going to pass on one, and then Mom's going to pass on one of these as well. So if you take a look at all the possibilities, there's 4 different combinations that they could potentially give to their children. And when we get into something like this, when we're looking at all the different children possibilities, then we're going to be looking at Punnett squares. So a Punnett square is a diagram that just helps us to predict what combinations we could get from our parents. It doesn't tell us what we're actually going to get if the two parents were to mate, but it does kind of predict what could happen. So here is a Punnett square, and this is specifically for a plant. So we have the pollen, which is the male, and the pistil is from the female. And we have 2 different alleles. So this flower is purple. They have the dominant, but they also have the trait for white, even though they don't show it themselves. And the other parent also is purple. They have the dominant, but they have the recessive for white flowers. They just don't show it themselves. So if these two were to cross-pollinate with each other and form flowers, that's where we got that white flower showing back up in the F2 generation. So a Punnett square, very useful. We're going to be doing a lot of these. Just some information I've already been mentioning a few different times, but so that you have it written down. Anytime you see a capital letter, that is going to be your dominant allele. So if you see a capital letter here, this flower, for instance, has 2 capital letters, so they're going to show the dominant trait. And if you have a recessive letter, that's going to represent a lowercase. Now remember, when we said dominant means that it's going to show up even if you have one of them. So notice that this flower with the capital B lowercase b, they have one dominant and they have one recessive. Well, a dominant allele is going to show up even if there's only one of them. So that's why this particular flower is purple, even though it has the lowercase letter. In order to show the recessive trait, white, you have to have no dominant letter present. And that's where we're going to stop. We'll get into some other vocabulary and then actually start practicing some Punnett squares here in the next day.